Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for our attendees who have signed on to join our panel of experts to help us continue our conversation around systemic racism in San Antonio. And today we're going to be talking about business and the economy. So just before we get started and I introduce our moderator, just a friendly reminder that as you are entering the meeting, you are automatically muted. We ask that you keep it that way just to kind of limit any background noise so that the panelists are able to speak and have a conversation. Though we do want the conversation to be interactive, so please use the chat feature to make any comments or ask any questions. So once we start the conversation, we will about 12:45, 12:50, we'll ask the final question and then open it up for Q&A. So either you can ask any questions you have of the panelists via the chat feature, or at that time you can unmute yourself and ask a question over the call. And then in the meantime, we just welcome everyone for joining and thank you for being a part of these critical conversations that we know we want to have as a Girl Scout organization. So to get started, let me make sure no one else needs to be admitted. Okay. I'd like to introduce our moderator is Connon-Ballou, is President of Training Solutions and Associates, providing professional services for workforce development organizations and various businesses. She spent her 20-year career in economic and small business development, overseeing programs at both the local and state level. In her retirement, she has started a new endeavor selling real estate, so she's not really retired. SaWanna is a Girl Scout alum and community leader, currently chairing the African American Advisory Committee for Girl Scouts of Southwest Texas, and is active as a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and is the current vice president of the newly chartered Alpha Alpha Xi Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So SaWanna, thank you so much for agreeing to moderate today's panel, and I will let you take it away.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Thank you, Stephanie, and you are so very welcome. I am just delighted to do this for you. I'm happy to be here today and to try to wrangle this discussion. So I'm excited about that. I'd like to welcome our panelists of experts. We first have Lisa Marie Gomez, who is the Vice President of Education and Workforce Development for the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce. Her work involves advocating at the local, state, and federal levels for policies that increase equitable access to education opportunities and workforce pathways that lead to high wages, in-demand jobs in our community. And we all know that's critical. As a native San Antonian, Lisa Marie holds a master's degree in international peace studies from the International University of Japan and a bachelor's in social justice, sustainable development, and peace studies from the University of Redlands in Southern California. Then we have Wayne Terry. He is the president and CEO of Terranalia Consulting. It is a business that he started after retiring from a career in corporate diversity and public affairs at HEB. As a partner at HEB, Wayne worked with small, women, minority, disabled, and veteran-owned businesses to help founded the company's Corporate Diversity and Leadership Council nearly 20 years ago. He probably doesn't look that old, but Wayne's been around a while. Wayne currently serves as the chair for the Family Violence Prevention Services as president of ACTS, the ACTS mission worldwide, and was selected by Mayor Nuremberg to serve on the City of San Antonio's Economic Transition Team to guide the city's recovery efforts during the COVID pandemic. We've all been locked in, so Wayne, get busy so we can get out, all right? And then we have the esteemed Renee Watson. And Renee Watson is the director of the Small Business and Entrepreneur Development for Bexar County. As a recognized expert on disparity studies. She oversees the county's small minority women-owned business program, lovingly known as SWIMBY, that's what we call it, and ensures that the county follows the non-discriminatory practices. She is a Girl Scout alum. Renee currently serves as a board member for CrossPoint and is a recipient of numerous awards, including Servant Leader Award for the San Antonio chapter of Blacks in Government and the Chamber Champion Award from the San Antonio LGBT Chamber of Commerce in 2019. Welcome, panelists. So that we can set the stage of what we'll be discussing today, I asked Stephanie for a few talking points that pretty much lay out our council's goals and how we go about programming. So the Girl Scout programs are based on 4 foundational pillars: STEM, which everybody is familiar with, STEM careers, outdoors, entrepreneurship, and life skills. And all Girl Scout badges and activities fit within those foundational pillars. Girls are introduced to and gain skills in these subjects and can inspire them as she goes forward in her career aspirations. Girls also benefit from the social and emotional learning outcomes of the Girl Scout leadership experience, which includes a strong sense of self, developing positive values, maintaining healthy relationships, seeking challenges, and taking action to make the world a better place. And anyone who is a Girl Scout alum knows we certainly were prepared for that. These are the soft skills that help girls develop resiliency to overcome any obstacles she will face as she grows into adulthood and are essential to success in the workplace. Would we all agree to that? Everybody shake your head and let us know. All right. So with that, I'd like to start with our panelist. And since he is the only male, I'd like to start with Wayne. I will ask a series of questions, and panelists, please feel free to jump in. I will direct it first to one individual, but if the others have anything to say, we welcome your input. So we'll start with Wayne. Wayne, what are some of the implicit biases in hiring and promoting practices in the workplace, and how do you think they affect people of color?
Good afternoon. Very, very happy to be here, and thank you for the question, SaWanna. I'll start off by saying that there are a lot of micro-inequities in the job search and in the business world today. And so some of those things that are placed in front of people of color when they are applying for a position, or even if they get the position and are in the workplace, are really the same as they go. So one of the main things is that people of color are often held to a higher standard. So you could be looking at 2 exact resumes, and both of those people can go in the interview, and one person gets a job over the other one. And more often than not, the person that did not get the job was a person of color. It is almost as if you have to do twice as much as the next person than is acceptable in order to get the position. And so those are some of the things that affect people of color before they even walk in the door. They are often assumed to be less qualified, no matter what their resume states, no matter what their background. They're often assumed that they don't have the necessary business acumen to get the job. There's a double standard at times, and it is something that is very, very commonplace. And we've come a long way, but we've got a long way to go. Many businesses will put in place programs around diversity and attracting the people of color to their campus. I served as a diversity recruiter for an organization. And oftentimes when I brought those folks into the corporate world to be interviewed, they face challenges in the interview process. And so those are things that are not only at a mid-level, but also at an upper level. When you are in the workplace, some of the same practices are held as in the recruiting. For instance, managers and leaders often pull in new people as proteges and mentees. They more often than not will pick someone that looks like them. And in our world today, in our corporate world, and the people, the leaders of our institutions happen to be white males. And so they're looking at young white males to be proteges and mentees. And in many, many corporations, you have people of color that go by the wayside because they don't have a manager or a leader championing them.
All right, thank you, Wayne. Renee, did you have anything to add to that? Or Lisa Marie?
Renee was on mute.
Like I'm muted. Sure. Sorry about that. That's one of my biases. I'm always muted. One of the things as a scout and the girls to really help prepare themselves, one of the things that we see is because you have a lack of network, you have a lack of internship, which means you don't have the experience coming into the workplace or the navigation or learning how to go through from the conversation within that culture. Because the culture of the workplace is often different from the culture of your household, your culture of college, and your culture of your friends. So it's an adjustment that has to be made, but due to the lack of the network and getting inside while you're in college or you're doing a work study program or just being from the neighborhood, the access is the contributing factor to that systemic racism, especially here in San Antonio. The climate is so limited that the scouting helps to develop the curiosity on how to find other programs to be a part of. And because you have that organizational structure, maybe not at home or friends or family, you should take advantage of it, just like I did, and learning how to navigate the workplace so you can get considered and get into those special programs.
All right, thank you. Lisa Marie, how does educational attainment influence the workforce development and health of the community's economy? And what barriers do you think exist for our students of Black and Hispanic heritage?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much to Stephanie for inviting me, to Angie for letting me be on this panel, this esteemed panel. I really appreciate it. This is a topic that is very, I'm glad to see our community talking about it more in a variety of forums. I wanted to just make one quick comment on the previous question about implicit bias, and one of the terms that I've been seeing come up more and more is the term mirror-tocracy, and which means when you've got hiring and promoting that reflects only people that look like you, rather than hiring a person that's best for the job. And so I think that naming that is the only way to really address some of that. But going to your question, which is really important, San Antonio has lagged behind has really lagged behind, and also just had very stagnant progress in terms of educational attainment, particularly for our students of color. I think maybe we're at about 26% of our population as a whole that has some kind of higher degree. And I think this pandemic has really brought to light who really is most vulnerable. So looking at the folks that were most impacted, they're people that have a high school diploma, or those that have some college and no degree, which is a significant number. So just those two populations alone, if we put them all together, it is I don't know, something about 80% maybe, maybe even a little bit more of those that have been dislocated by the pandemic. So that right there, I think is a good indicator of that tie between educational attainment and workforce security. You know, some of the barriers that we've seen in some of the other work that I've done with organizations is it seems very simple, but it's significant in that there's a lot of just confusion when we talk about students transitioning from graduating from high school to enrolling into a post-secondary program, whether it's a community college or one of the universities. I was on a group recently that we've been working on this very issue and found that the number of, this is specific to our Latinx high school grads, but of Latinx grads who applied and were accepted to a program, there were only about 36% that actually enrolled into the university. And so that's a huge drop off. And so when we did some more outreach and just trying to figure out what's the root cause, and it really came down to students are once they graduate from high school and before they officially enroll in their, in their university, in their community college, they kind of don't belong to anybody. There's a period where they really have to be very proactive with the communication, and it's very confusing. So many students said, it's just confusing. I didn't know what to do. I'm the first one in my family that's going to college. And, my parents can't really help me. They support me. The teachers from high school are on summer vacation. I'm having a hard time connecting with somebody at the university. I just need, I need someone to help me navigate this. And so that's one of the things that in particular, UP Partnership through their diplomas network, they've been working very closely with UTSA and Texas A&M San Antonio to try to change that huge attrition that happens. So that way students can then enroll and then take advantage of all the different supports to help them get their degree and then move into an education and be less vulnerable to job loss in a pandemic, job loss in general, but just to build that career resilience.
Okay. Renee, a common phrase in business, and this goes back to something you said earlier, a common phrase in business, it's not what you know, it's who you know, and you spoke to having that network. So how important is it for people of color to build their own social network in advance of maybe getting this career, as Lisa Marie is saying, before that transition occurs?
Well, one of the things, and we see it all the time, we hear it, the confusion becomes you have a social network, but you don't have a professional network. You socialize with those that you know, and you don't maybe not have the confidence or the courage to reach out to others to help you or to ask because you don't want to get that automatic no. And there's nothing wrong with getting that no because, all of us have been told no, and it never stops us from getting till we finally get that yes for someone else to give us a hand up, a handshake, or to help us to do whatever. And that phrase, it's not what you know, but it is what you know, because you have to be prepared and you have to be able to have the best quality, the best of what you're doing, the best that you're selling. And then you can say it's who you know, whether you're seeking a contract, it's who you know, making sure you're not talking to the wrong person, you're talking to the decision maker. It's if you're getting hired, making sure that you're going through the application process, whether it's online. And if the system is asking you for information, making sure that you're providing it. So it's a combination of both, but those networks are very, very important because access to success comes with having others that can help you, whether it's in your career or in business. and you look at anyone who is successful and you ask them to tell you their story, they're going to name some mentors or some people that helped them along the way.
SaWanna, if I can jump in on this question too. Renee is absolutely right on target with this, but to give you a more current example on how difficult it is to attract investors and capital, one of the biggest problems when the PPP loans went out to those businesses during COVID, businesses and organization, minorities and people of color were by far and away a large group of people who were turned down or didn't have the opportunity to access that because their networks and their relationships with the professionals in the financial institution that were approving those loans. And so why? It's as Renee said, they didn't have a good relationship with maybe their bankers or accountants or people like that that could make those decisions and say yes to them, or people that could guide them through the process. And so that is a huge, huge barrier for success. My personal experience, having retired after 33 years of business, I was lucky to have worked with a lot of small and minority and women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, who literally reached out to me and called and said, hey, I hear you went into your business for yourself. Let me help you and walk you through the process. So, but I had a vast network, and so it was much easier. But most of our people of color don't have that kind of network and aren't trained to go out and get that kind of network.
I think quickly to Wayne's point about training to get that kind of network and thinking about it for young people, which we talked about internships and job placed experience and building up that network, but also really building an understanding like in our communities. And I'm from the West Side here, and that it is, there's two parts of it, of building that network, but also not being afraid to pick up the phone and ask, like, hey, I'm applying for this job or this internship, or, if you're a business, this contract, can you, any insight you can give me, like any support, that those things are okay to do, and to follow up with all of the people that tell you, especially as young people, it is okay. Like if someone gives you their contact information and says, give me a call, let me know, let's set up a coffee, like that, you really need to do it, because that offer, I think more often than not, is really genuine.
Okay, great. That's some good feedback. Now, which leads right into my next question. Can you, Lisa Marie, and all of the panelists, give me some examples of policies or practices that need to change or to be put into place that would offer more equitable opportunities to people of color? And Lisa, I will start with you since we have you on the screen, and then we can go to the other two.
Sure. I think in terms of business, the most significant policy changes that can really happen are with financial institutions. Looking at things like measuring, how do they measure credit worthiness? It's, looking at different ways to do that are more equitable. So instead of looking at credit scores, looking at, applicant's credit and payment history. Looking and expanding the board of directors at many, many places. It's really important for any organization that has a board that has influence. It needs to be diverse, one, for just perspectives, but also to provide, to be able to better serve underserved communities in that equitable way. On the financing side, like you have to have your boards of whether it's, private equity firms, venture capitalists, angel investors, whatever. They need to reflect these communities that they're serving in order to even evaluate them in a fair way. That, and of course, there are just a lot of red tape policies that, especially as everybody across the country here in, San Antonio, Bexar County, as we were responding to the pandemic, there's a lot of red tape that was cut through, but things like, and Wayne talked about it earlier, like some of the reason why the applications, whether it's for PPC or PPP or other forms of funding, can be really complicated. And so figuring out a way to streamline those processes. On the student side, I think one of the most important policies that every school district can adopt is, one, having a student representative that is present at their board meetings, and two, having a student drafted, co-developed Bill of Rights that is based at the district level, that is created in partnership with the students and the administration.
Renee, can you speak to that, policies that you think, or policies and or practices that could change or be implemented to offer more equitable opportunities?
Absolutely. One of the things that's really moving and creating these conversations, and the city council just did a resolution on racism being how did they term it? It was a health crisis in San Antonio. Because of the systemic racism, health disparities occur in low income and segregated communities, especially in our communities. And we know that, we can see the numbers. I work at Bexar County. 1 in 4 individuals in this county have been through our criminal justice system here at the county. We have 70% dropout rate in San Antonio, Bexar County. One of the things that many of the policymakers and leadership do not talk about is literacy. If we would have a serious conversation about literacy, the multi-generational effect of racism and poverty could be cured in San Antonio. There are communities across this country that they have literacy commissions, literacy committees, and everyone has that conversation about what's going on. When we look at, and the work I do every day is in supplier development. When Toyota came to town, everybody got excited about the 2,000 jobs that received almost 300,000 applications for those 2,000 jobs. But one of the things, the conversation did not happen was with that supplier market that's out there. Since Toyota had a unit that creates minority suppliers, the conversation said, who do we have in the community? And they identified 3 Hispanic individuals who had access to capital, and they put them in the automotive industry. And now that supplier park has the first female Hispanic out there as well. They have an African-American firm that they brought here from Indiana that runs the Millennium Steel plant. So when we look at how do we create wealth and legacy, multi-generational, especially right now, this month, we're celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. And we look at those multi-generational businesses. In San Antonio, it's hospitality, restaurants. When PPP started, a lot of the folks called us the day before the deadline because they just found out about the application. Well, they needed a DBA and an EIN in order to put on that application, and they did not have those documents because they were operating a cash business in our communities for 20 or 30 years. It never occurred to them that they had to have those government papers, as we called them. So it really helped. It really took a toll on our community not being able to participate because we were not prepared. So we have to be prepared, and we have to have those difficult conversations with those in our communities on why they should be prepared.
Wayne, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll say one of the practices that needs to change to offer equitable opportunities is, and I mentioned it before, was what does the majority of our corporations look like in the leadership realm? Who are those leading those companies? And so particularly in San Antonio, where construction is booming, about 90% of those organizations are led by white males. And so in that business, there tends to be a good old boy network. And so I'm going to hire my buddy who I've known for a long time and who is in my circle of friends. And so there's always that barrier that, again, these people of color, their businesses, they haven't interacted, they don't know those folks, and so they're not given that opportunity. The other aspect of it is that when you are bidding out a job, if you're a large company, you're looking for someone to come in and help you. If you're what we call a general contractor, then you might be asking for experienced businesses. So it's almost a vicious circle, in that I'm looking at maybe an African American or a Hispanic company, and I'm saying, man, I'd love to hire you, but you don't have the experience. Well, if nobody gives them the experience, how are they supposed to get the experience? And so that cycle keeps happening over and over. And so sometimes you have to take a chance. Now, and I know Renee understands this, because we've worked together in the past on issues. When I was over supplier diversity at HEB, most of the businesses that I dealt with that were people of color could do the job that was out there just as good as, or even better than, some of the bigger and longer and more experienced companies that have been around a longer time. They were just never given a chance. And when we did fight and scratch and give them the chance, the general contractors or the companies were like, wow, I can't believe they did what they did, and they did it on time, or they did it faster, and they did it better. So a lot of times that policy, that sort of unwritten policy out there, well, I know this guy, I know what he can do, I've known him for 30 years. What they did find when they were giving people a chance was that those guys that they've known for 30 years, they knew them, and they took advantage of that situation. So there were delays, and they didn't put them, at the front of the category when it comes to finishing the business.
Okay. So you guys have all touched on one question that resonates with me. How difficult is it for minority-owned businesses to attract investors or access to capital? We talked a little about the PPP, but what about access to capital to start a business or to grow their businesses? And I'd like to start with Renee, since she does SWIMBY, and then I'll circle back to everybody else. But Renee, can you tackle that for us?
Absolutely, because we'll break that. We kind of try to put that in buckets, because if you're a startup business, the risk is very high, depending on what you're starting up, the industry, and what type of capital you're trying to access. Usually that comes from family and friends, because they're the ones that's willing to take the risk on you. Because even as what Wayne was just talking about, there's a risk associated with that. And if you don't finish the project, or if you don't return give me returns on my investment, I'm going to take a loss. Am I in the position to do that? You see that right now during COVID with these mortgages and with these people trying to flip houses, and the rental assistance programs. San Antonio, within the next 3 or 4 months, is going to be even more in an economic crisis we see going forward. And how do you attract that capital when your basis of your small business is your mortgage, and then you can't pay your mortgage? So you're pretty much going to have a double whammy. You're out of business and you're homeless. And then what do we do with that whole sector of our community? Then you look at those who have been in business 3 to 4 years, has been doing between $2 and $5 million. Those are the folks who are trying to do business with, like the HEBs that Wayne can really talk about, and others, and those who are hiring local in our different workforce programs. They have a very difficult time raising capital as well, because sometimes their credit is not as great, because the struggle that they took to get to that level is tremendous. And when they look at that credit score, if that is the only thing that the financial institution is looking at, it creates a lot of difficulty. That's why the LIFT fund and the micro lenders and the community development corporations that we have in the community and around the state are very successful. And then there's only a few, I can count probably on my one hand, the minority businesses that do more than $10 million in San Antonio as revenue. It's not that many. And that's unfortunate that we haven't grown in investment and to help those companies to accelerate. So those are the type of programs we're really trying to focus on. How do you get those firms to accelerate? Because we know that in the minority and women, veteran, LGBT community, you hire from those you know, just like in the non-veteran minority women community, because to lower the risk. So you can bring in your family, your neighborhood, if you're in business. And we see that. You will hire the formerly incarcerated if you're formerly incarcerated. So we take those types of programs. It's a very difficult process, and everyone is one at a time.
Lisa Marie?
Well, I mean, Renee gave a very comprehensive response there. I think, you know, maybe the only thing that I would add is just about, you know, there is a larger need just to shift the narrative about businesses that are owned by people of color, you know, by women, by veterans, to that, you know, to really seeing that, you know, shifting that narrative from like a deficit mindset of all of the things that they probably don't have, to recognizing that there's a wealth of assets that they might be different than what you know. But that is an important piece of all of this, you know, and having that access to whatever the resources are at the different stages, you know, whether it's resources to you're already a successful business and to lift that up and expand that. But there is a narrative shift that I hope that, you know, collectively we're moving towards more understanding about, you know, about all of the assets that we have within our communities of color. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah, Renee covered that well.
All right. Wayne, do you have anything to add, sir? All right, well then I'll move on. I'm guessing he doesn't.
Wayne is on mute. Were you?
I can't.
I was saying I just agree with Renee and Lisa Marie. They captured it well.
Covered it. Okay, great. Renee brought up something that's near and dear to my heart is, what about the second chance? The second chance program of hiring. She mentioned that if you are a felon, you are more likely to hire someone who's been incarcerated. How does that play into this whole disparity conversation and racism? If you're African American and you have a record, is that a double whammy? Can anybody speak to that?
I'll say it's a quadruple whammy.
Yeah, I was gonna say quadruple, quintuplet.
You know,
yeah.
Because it's bad enough without any baggage, and then you add baggage to that, and so you're not going to get a loan. I mean, it's just going to be very, very hard to get a loan. It's going to be very, very hard to get into business. A lot of folks some of the small businesses that I met were people who may have been incarcerated. So they said, nobody's going to hire me. I'm going to start my own business. And, you know, depending on their will and their determination, they've succeeded. But a lot of them don't. And then, you know, COVID happened. And that just knocked a bunch of people out, or at least had them furlough their business for a while. But as Renee said, you know, things are going to get a lot worse in San Antonio before they get better. And when they do try to come back, if they're able to come back, they're going to need capital. And that capital is probably not going to be there unless they have the right connections and they have the right people. Renee mentioned a word that is extremely, extremely relevant in everything that we've talked about with regards to businesses. And that word is risk. So whether you're a lender, a bank, or a corporation looking for help, there's always a risk. Anytime you are going to do something, anytime you step out and say, if I'm talking about HEB and we're going to build a store, and we hire a general contractor, and that general contractor is going out to hire subcontractors, each of those decisions involves a risk. And so that general contractor knows that he's got to be holding the HEB to make sure that store gets up on time and is done right. And so it depends on how much risk he's willing to take. Now, as an HEB, we said, you know what? You are responsible for the subcontractors. We need to make sure that you're hiring diverse subcontractors. And literally about 10 years ago, I had a general contractor come to me and said, there are none qualified out there. And I thought, wait a minute, we're talking about the city of San Antonio. You're telling me there's no diverse subcontractors out there. Well, they didn't look hard enough. And so we pushed back on them and made them find them. And so it's a tough road. And the best way, and everything that we've talked about is sort of a round robin in the sense that education, access, mentorship, those things are all critical in the success of people of color.
Well, I would like to add on the formerly incarcerated, because I actually teach a class on entrepreneurship inside the Bexar County Jail. I'm involved in a program with the state of Texas called the Prison Entrepreneurship Program. Because one of the things we try to share is that confidence, whether you are getting a job, and again, it goes back to my first comments, you're going to get a lot of no's just because of maybe the neighborhood you're from, the skin color. But having that on your record because you made a mistake, whether you're a young person or it was just somebody like us who made a mistake and they got caught. Because only by the grace of God are we sitting here and didn't get caught up in the criminal justice system. Mm-hmm. Because each one of us could tell our stories and we'd probably say we made some mistakes. Mm-hmm. So we have to be very compassionate with individuals. So my office is right next to the DBA office where you file for your assumed name. And I see a lot of individuals who are coming in who are looking for ways to take care of their families. And they haven't been able to secure employment. So what do we do with that community, again, with 1 in 4 individuals in Bexar County going through the criminal justice system? Commissioner Calvert has a job fair where we do for a second chance. We've done it 5 times at the AT&T Center at the Coliseum. And we go out and we reach out to employers who say, if they come through the back of the building, we will hire them. But if they come through the lobby, we're not going to be able to entertain that conversation. So we try to figure out how to get them in, whether we have to meet somewhere off-site or wherever, as long as that individual can get hired. Because some individuals, they can be that subcontractor on Wayne's project because their risk is too high. If they may mess up, and then the company that they're working for loses everything. So there's a lot to be considered in that process. So we work with those communities every day to try to make a difference.
Awesome.
This is also an issue that the Chamber has recently gotten more involved in. And specifically, Renee talked about, okay, the front door and coming in like through the lobby and, okay, the different ways to get people just their foot in the door. And so we, actually, it was the U.S. Chamber Foundation that reached out to us and said, hey, we are trying to figure out a comprehensive playbook or recommendations to increase the number of businesses that do second chance hiring. But we realized that we don't know the real candid reasons why businesses may be reluctant to do second chance hiring. And this is aside from industries that have security and background checks, but knowing that this is a matter of human dignity and a person to be able to to be self-sufficient and provide for themselves and their families, and how important that is. And so we actually have a small business to business meeting to have this very conversation that's hopefully candid to figure out, okay, what are the reasons behind the external reasons, the front facing reasons, and then might there be something that then we can do as a community to reduce some of those barriers and increase that confidence amongst business owners to start second chance hiring. So, and that's specifically, for people seeking employment, not necessarily the entrepreneurs, but that is awesome too, entrepreneurs, that program.
I hear that. Awesome.
SaWanna, can I add just one little caveat?
Absolutely.
Because this conversation takes us back to before affirmative action. Because the conversation I put on the table about going through the back door, the front door, the side door. Remember, when we were colored or we were Negroes, we faced the same problem. Unless you could pass, you couldn't get in the front door. So now with Second Chance, unless someone is helping you or giving you that advantage, you can't go through the front door. I'm old enough to have experienced that segregation. And again, I was a brownie at the time. But going through the back door of the Coliseum when my mom took me, or through the front door when my aunt took me in her maid uniform because she worked for somebody in Alamo Heights in San Antonio. So to be still sitting in a position where we're still having the same conversations about systemic racism in San Antonio, whether it's to the formerly incarcerated community, people of color, indigenous community, because I'm a Seminole Indian out of Brackettville. So I have all the boxes I can check almost, except that formerly incarcerated. So we work very hard every day, and we hope that through scouting, these girls can help and to really get an understanding of it's not going to go away. It's taken me more than 50 years. I'm still experiencing it. Hopefully they can work every day and to help it to go away. But it's not an easy battle, and it's not something that happens and you stop doing and you can realize it overnight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Renee, for those words of wisdom. Wisdom, that's wisdom speaking. Now, we know that given the current events that have most recently happened, and Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, has really reignited the conversation about representation, and representation matters. How important do you feel that having that Black representation on local boards and commissions, how do you feel that that is still important, and what can we do to change that? Renee, you're up. So
well, okay, that was me. I'll start. I think it's the conversation that's been the two words that we talk about, and I do a lot of these roundtables, between equality and equity. So we spent a lot of years fighting for equality. It didn't quite get us to the table, or if it got us there, the pie just got smaller. And we couldn't take advantage of it. So now the conversation is about equity. Everybody is using that word equity. And what does that really mean? When you have to replace someone, it's a little bit of a pushback. And I think that's what the country is facing right now. Because we're not asking you to move down a chair. We're telling you to get up and let us sit down at the table. And to really understand and address the issues that are being put at the table. Because representation in a limited fashion, one at the table, one manager, one of each race, and then you decide within that race based on the population of that community, who will be that representative based on the population of the community. That has been affirmative action, turned into diversity. Now it's diversity and inclusion. So now everyone is saying, well, now it's BLM. And you don't even say the word, you just say BLM. Everybody uses the acronym because the acronym is easier than really talking about what it is. So boards and commissions where you can get in, but you gotta be prepared. Just having a seat at the table is not good enough anymore. You gotta be able to read the financials. You gotta be able to help the staff and the leadership and understand why you're there, not just to be, just having a seat at the table. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
I would say this, if you look at what happened to George Floyd as the experience that sort of ignited this flame, in the United States of America, we have seen a tectonic shift in attitudes towards race, attitudes of Black Lives Matter. Prior to that, most corporations and businesses and nonprofits wouldn't even say Black Lives Matter or BLM. They were afraid, they were terrified to talk about it. Part of the things that I do in consulting is I go and I work with those organizations and corporations on their statement after George Floyd. Everybody, I was getting calls left and right from companies and organizations that said, we want to put out a statement. We want to have this frank discussion on race. Can you help us? And so I did. And one of the things that was amazing during a George Floyd protest, and some of it is still going on today, is that in the history of this country, particularly around civil rights, when you saw marches, when you saw events happening, those things were always regionalized, maybe in one or two regions. After George Floyd happened, you saw it all across America. We watched marches in Kansas where the population of African Americans and people of color were less than 3%. There was 1,000 people marching. There were only 2 people that were African American in the group. There were protests around the world, 37 different countries. Syria, who is a completely bombed out nation, had a 14-foot mural of George Floyd on the wall. So this is a fire that is burning that we can't afford to let go. And I think that when you talk about these organizations, as I met with them, because we're still on Zoom, I'm looking at their picture on my computer, on my screen, of a board that is 16 to 20 people. And 17 are white males. And I'm like, you called me to discuss race. I need you to be open. I need you to be honest. And I need you to look at the screen that I'm looking at. And it was sort of like a rush. They'd never thought about it before. And so they committed to themselves, not to me, because I'm just a consultant, but they committed, we have to bring in people of color. Now I cautioned them and I said, do not bring in people of color to change your screen. Bring in people of color because of what they can bring to the table, and listen to them. That's the most important thing.
Add substance.
Yes.
Substance. Lisa Marie, real quick, I know we have less than a minute, but this is so good. This information is so rich. I know that we need to move on, but Lisa Marie, do you have any last words that you can add?
Well, I would just echo the importance of this representation. I think maybe both Wayne and Renee have hit just solid points about the importance of it. The only thing that I would add is really just to punctuate how we do have this momentum, and it is really important to think about activating that and turning that into, whether it's boards or individuals or whatever that looks like, but turning that into action that moves, that moves towards a more just system. But really just reckoning with that, this kind of work, it has to be very intentional. It's not going to happen because a whole bunch of people across the country are talking about it. It just has to be very intentional, and at the core of it, there's an understanding of, the need for interdependent, inclusive growth. That is what we want to do. And it just has to be very deliberate and thoughtful.
Well, thank you to each of you panelists. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to share with us today. For those participants watching, please remember the Anti-Racism Pledge. You have that website. And I'm going to turn it back over to Stephanie. Again, I think you guys have been awesome. I know there is work to do, and we're all in the fields doing it. So I look forward to seeing you guys about the city and about the community. Know that we're all on the same team working towards the same goal. Stephanie?
Thank you so much, SaWanna. And yes, I'd like to reiterate, I want to thank SaWanna for working so hard to be prepared to moderate the conversation today. And thank you to Lisa Marie, Renee, and Wayne for making the time to share your expertise. I think you shared so much great information, that a lot of new information for our volunteers. So thank you so much for that. And in case you didn't look, in case you haven't seen, Renee put her contact information in the chat, as well as Lisa Marie. So thank you just so much. There's resources out there for small businesses if you want to reach out to Renee's office. Yes, to wrap up, thank you to the attendees who participated. And if you have any questions, we're getting a lot of things in the chat about thank you. This was awesome, great discussion. So a lot of good, a lot of listening happening. So I did want to just kind of introduce that this is the third in this 4-series educational series where we're really looking at systemic racism in our community, right, in our backyard. So today we talked about business and the economy, and we had a lot of great discussion. Next week, we're going to talk about healthcare. It'll be our final event. But this is really the first phase of really fulfilling our anti-racism pledge with Girl Scouts of the USA. I did add that link into the chat. I invite all of you to look at that pledge online, to take it and join us in this movement to really make Girl Scouting an anti-racist organization. That doesn't mean just the external education that we're working on now with this first phase, but also looking at internally our own organization, our own hiring and recruitment practices for volunteers and staff. So all of that work is going to happen not overnight, but we're committed as a council to making it happen over the next months and years until we get it right, and we fix the system. So I invite you to look at that. Also, just a reminder, in case you had any friends who you think would benefit from this presentation, there is going to be the recording of this event is going to air again on our Facebook and YouTube channels on Saturday. So this Saturday, September 26th at 1 p.m. So look for that. And if you want to continue your learning, please join us next Tuesday on the 29th at noon to hear from physicians in San Antonio to talk about racial disparities in healthcare. So that's going to be another very relevant conversation. And you can RSVP at bit.ly/race and healthcare. I also put the link in the chat, so you can go ahead and RSVP for that as well. Again, thank you to our panel and to SaWanna so much. We appreciate all the time. And with that said, I think we'll let everybody go. Let's see. So just make sure you're looking at the chat and say, and thank you from everyone. Anna appreciates the speakers. Our CEO, Angie, had a message in there earlier thanking everyone. She's been on the call and listening in. So thank you so much for helping us educate our members and for helping us start these critical conversations and helping us do the hard work that we know we need to do as an organization and as a community. So thank you.